unleavened bread. And what was unleavened bread? Unleavened bread was bread that didn't have anything in it to make it rise. It did not have what we call today yeast. Yeast belongs to what family? It's a family, a spore family. And what it does, when they would make bread, they would take the bread and they would let the bread sit outside. And when the bread would sit outside, the spores in the air, and they were looking for a certain type of spore that would light on the bread and embed itself in the bread, and it would begin to eat at the bread that had been made into dough. And when it ate the bread, it gave off what we call carbon dioxide. And when it gave off carbon dioxide, you might say Belgium, or it got gas. When this virus gives off gas, it makes bubbles, and it pushes the bread, the dough, into larger and larger fibers, and it gets holes in it, and we call the bread rising, or we got bread ready to bake. Those of you that don't know about baking, your mind's somewhere else, you don't understand it. So what they would do every year at this particular feast time is that they would have this bread, and when they would have this bread, they could not allow this germ or virus or spore or mold to infect the bread. They had to protect it because God said you're going to eat unleavened bread for 7 days, and you got to clean your house out. Well, this calls for sanctification. When you begin to understand, you got to protect what God has given you. You can't allow leaven, which Jesus uses as sin. Jesus told them to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. Leaven is represented in the Bible as sin. A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. You don't have to do nothing to get a little yeast in that bread, and that bread will really blow up. I remember a sitcom years ago. How many of you all remember Lucy? Y'all remember when Lucy was baking and she put too much yeast in the bread, and that yeast had to blew that bread all up, and she had got trapped in there? Well, yeast, and that yeast or that leaven is living. It's something that's alive, and you got to understand that evil lives, and if you don't protect yourself from evil, it'll get in you. That's why our folks sit around puffed up in the church. You got puffed up, but God don't want you to get nothing around what He's watering. He wants to increase, but He don't want the devil to get in there. You remember when we go back to Matthew, he begins to talk about when the weeds grew up, the wheat and the tares. He said, I didn't plant no weeds, I planted wheat. But the next day, we got weeds growing up. He said, our enemy has done this. You know the enemy will come